Welcome, everyone. Welcome to another installment of the Nanoeducators Quarterly Forums. This is a special forum that meets 4 times a year, and it is a collaboration between my office, the National Technology Coordination Office, Mariel Kolker, a physics and engineering teacher at Morrisontown High School in New Jersey, and Daniela Duran, the Education and Outreach Director at Nano at Stanford. And also, she's back to the classroom this semester as a high school teacher in California. We are very excited that this forum has continued now for more than 3 years, and it is completely driven by your interest and what you tell us you want to learn about. So please, in the chat, in the comments, in the emails, just let us know what you're teaching right now, what you're interested to learn more of, and we'll make it happen. We're hopeful that the next section would be in January or February. And we have a very exciting presentation today. We have two speakers that are going to be discussing the Atlas program based at Cornell University. We have David Syracuse, instructor at the TST Boshi Vision Engineering program, and Tom Pennell from Cornell University, who will be talking more about how they developed this program and how you can bring it to your students. At the very end of the session, we always share resources that anyone wants to share with everyone else, and I'll make sure to put in the chat where all those resources can be found. And without further ado, David, Tom, take it away. Let me stop sharing.
Thanks for the introduction, Maria. So some of you may have seen me present at a Nano Educators Forum in the past. I am so proud to introduce David Syracuse, who is one of my longtime collaborators from the TST BOCES New Visions Engineering program that is located right on the Cornell campus, where high school seniors are able to engage in all sorts of engineering disciplines. What started off as a once a year visit to CNF for David's students has blossomed into a really fantastic program that he and I have built up over time, and is really, I think, changing the landscape in terms of, workforce development and creating students that are entering the nanotech field in a really positive way. So, Dave, take it away.
Well, thanks so much, Tom. That's very kind. And Tom was instrumental, more than instrumental in creating all of this stuff. So it's wonderful that he's here as well. The first thing is just thanks. I know that a lot of you could be pretty much anywhere else at this particular time, and you're from all across the country, and we really appreciate that you're here. We think we've built a really interesting program, something that's easily replicable at lots of other facilities like ours, and we're excited to share it with you. So thanks for being here. I think you're in the right place. We'll get started because there's a lot to talk about. So here's the setup. We know that teachers in the US in the year 2025 and beyond have a lot to do. I have a copy here, or just a slice rather, from the New York State Science Learning Standards, which are based on the next generation science standards. And there's a lot of stuff in here. I imagine that a lot of you are familiar with this, but just to highlight a few things, this is a middle school standard. There's a lot of things going on here. If we look, they're asking, students to develop models and things like that. Additionally, not just developing models, they're asking them to put them into practice. We've got these DCIs, the cross-cutting concepts, and the science and engineering practices. I'm particularly interested in the science and engineering practices. I'm so happy that those are in there because it really highlights the fact that we have to learn things. That's a good thing to do. And maybe memorize a few things because the human brain is a really great integrator of information, but then we've got to actually apply them. And that's what engineering is all about. So I'm happy that those are in there. The point of the matter is there's a lot for science teachers to do. If we take it a little bit further, this is the New York State Portrait of a Graduate. I know that there's similar things throughout the country. I'm a teacher in New York State, so this is what I know. But this is what New York State says that everyone should be able to do when they graduate from high school. And that's a lot because on top of teaching the science content that we have to do, we have to make sure that students can do all of these things. And it's interesting because I'm not quite sure where all of these things will happen. I think by the end of the night tonight, you'll figure out that we can do all of this. But right now, critical thinking, I think, definitely happens in STEM classes, right? And innovative problem solving, that's probably in STEM classes. The rest of the things, I'm not quite sure. I think global citizenry comes in social studies, something like that. Surely language arts teaches us to communicate. Literacy across the content areas is certainly a tricky one, but very necessary. So we hope that's happening all over, essentially, right? And then the two other ones, maybe families at home are doing that, or maybe school counselors in some particular way. That's a lot for a teacher to do. And New York State in particular, but other states in general, are saying that every teacher has to participate in this some way. So, how do we tie this all together, right? That's a big challenge. It is also we'll have to integrate things like art and music and, workforce development if we're going to participate in capitalism and things like that. So I think we can get through this by asking a question. And the question is, how do you make things, right? I have two of my favorite pieces of artwork here, the Colossi of Memnon in Egypt and Starry Night here, right? And the one on the left, you make things by starting with something big and just chipping away until you've got what you want, right? And then with Starry Night, if you've ever had the fortune to see it, it's quite a rich painting, right? You start with a blank canvas and then you start building things up. And you might say to yourself, well, what on earth does this have to do with nanotechnology? Well, this is exactly what we do in a fab, right? You start with a bare wafer, you put a pattern on it, and then you either add things to it or you start etching things away. So I hope I've demonstrated in the first couple of minutes that we're all doing these nanotechnology concepts, and you can connect these to lots of different curricula across the high school, middle school, and elementary school areas. There's not much of a jump to get from where we are to where we need to go. The jump is important, though, and I'll let Tom jump in to explain a little bit more right here.
So, uh, yeah, so that previous slide shows that nanofabrication is incredibly easy. There are three primary concepts: photolithography, printing our patterns, and then once we've created those patterns, we're either depositing or etching. And then the fourth one is measurement, right? We have some very unique ways of measuring incredibly small things. But to that next slide, our country is up against a really big challenge. There are projected workforce shortages in this industry between 67,000 and 100,000 in the United States alone by 2030. And it's an international issue as well. So, how do we train a workforce? How do we train people to enter this field that's often referred to as the hidden industry? I mean, semiconductor devices power all of our lives, and a lot of folks don't even know they exist. They take them for granted, or they're just not aware that there's an entire industry here that creates these devices. So if you want to jump to the next one, Dave. So our engineers invented semiconductors a long time ago, right? But we're not leading in the worldwide space so much anymore. The United States graduates students, high school seniors in the millions per year. And about 6,000 of those students end up in the semiconductor industry. So if we're going to expand the industry in the United States, we've got to really start integrating nanotechnology into the high school curriculum and exposing people to this at a much younger age. Next one. So we're projecting a massive fab increase in the United States, and we're going to be short on people to work there, right? And to understand what the important devices they make are doing to empower people every day. Next. So looking at, US exports, semiconductors play a really big role. I was poking around for interesting statistics last week, and you know what the number one most manufactured device or widget ever made by a human is? It's the transistor. There are currently more transistors than leaves on trees on our planet. It's an incredible statistic, and that was met in, I think, 2018, right? So that's just think about the impact that the transistor alone has had on our society, right? That powers all of our devices. Next
And
slide, Dave. I think
yeah,
you're
so
jumping
that's
back in.
really important, right? Thank you for sharing that, Tom, because it highlights the fact that we're doing a great job educating students. But if we're going to prepare them for the future, we've got to do things a little bit differently. So let's kind of assess where we are so we know where we need to go, right? We've got education, and we know that that education has to be all of these things. We can't have kind of the factory education of yesteryear. We know that we've got a workforce that has to be nimble. They're not probably going to go into one job and leave that job when they retire. Statistics show that people nowadays are switching jobs much more frequently than they have. Critical thinking is important. You've got to be able to take skills from one particular area and move them to another area rather. And our economy, we know, is definitely changing, right? I recently learned the term new collar jobs, right? Not white collar or blue collar, but new collar. It's often said that teachers are training students for jobs that we don't know about yet. And I think in large part that's true. Uh, but largely, we do know what some of the jobs are going to be, and they're going to be in the semiconductor industry. So we can give students these skills that are not only good education, but are great for the economy and great for our workforce as well. So Tom and I are pretty sure that we have the solution to all of these things. And that solution is Atlas right here. That's Greg, one of my former students who went through the Atlas program. He's at Virginia University right now. And Atlas stands for Accelerator Training for Labor Advancement in Semiconductors. And credit to Tom for this excellent Atlas, holding not the world on his back, but holding a wafer on his back like that. So let's take a quick overview of what that is before we dive in a little bit more deeply. Atlas starts with some safety training and some chatting. Here we are at Cornell University. We're talking about what nano is, getting students an idea of what the scale that we're talking about is, and then we jump right into the clean room. There ain't no party like a science party, as Tom says. So we're learning about all the different areas of the clean room, why some have yellow lights and why some don't. The students get in here, they gown up, and they're learning about all these particular tools. Now, we're not just learning about what the tools do or where they are or how to use them. We're looking at the infrastructure behind them too. CNF has miles and miles of this stainless steel tubing carrying all these gases. They've got ways to create really very pure water, dispose of all the waste. A lot of the very interesting acids and chemicals that they use can't just be dumped down the drain. And a lot of these industries are even more hidden than the semiconductor industry, because in order to make all of these things, you've got to have all these allied industries. One of the hallmarks of the program is a plasma system deconstruction. Basically, we take apart a cool thing over the course of 2 days. This is an amazing way to learn about pneumatics, electronics, robotics, plasma, all sorts of things by digging into this machine and taking it apart. CNF has a really cool benefit from this in that they get quite a few spare parts for a lot of their tools as a result of this. Students, as I mentioned before, learn how to gown up completely. We don't just make the things, but we actually look at how we can measure what we've made. And obviously, there's a whole suite of tools to do that. And you can't fake that kind of enthusiasm. The students really do enjoy this kind of thing. So, in addition to being a great way to teach science, it's a wonderful way to engage students in their futures. So the goals are to really show the hidden industry. As Tom mentioned, there's a lot of things that are going on with semiconductors. They're in all of our pockets right now, in all likelihood, and not a lot of students know how all that happens. It's a great way to put traditionally siloed disciplines together, right? Biology and chemistry and physics all come together in the clean room. A good chunk of what goes on at CNF in the clean room is actually biological research, not material science or something that you might think. There's a lot of great ways to invigorate your curricula as well. I always say that, as a physics teacher myself, I used to give examples like a box sliding down a ramp. Well, I don't know how often that happens. It's an awful lot more interesting to give an example of, an argon ion and an electric field. You can get exactly the same concept across with something that's really useful. Many of you might be teaching storylines. That's a great way to get at the NGSS. And there's all sorts of storylines here. And I like to put this graphic of the rigor relevance framework from the Howard Hughes Medical Institute up because it shows that there's a lot of different ways that you could learn something. On the y-axis there, we've got something that looks an awful lot like Bloom's taxonomy, because it is. And then on the x-axis, we've got how relevant something is. So how rigorous a particular thing that you learn and how relevant it might be as well. We like to be up here where we're creating, and over here where we're applying things to real world situations. So we like to be in quadrant D. Now, I'm not saying that everything we learn and everything we teach has to be completely rigorous and completely relevant, but Atlas is a great way to get at both of these things in an engaging and really easy way. So we're hoping that you're listening out there and you're saying, wow, I would really like to start a program of my own. And we're here to help you. So please reach out. We'll give our contact information at the end of the presentation. But there are really only four things that you need in order to make Atlas work. You've got to have a high school, and there are thousands and thousands of those across the country. You've got to have a clean room. Now, there are fewer clean rooms, but there are a lot of them, and a lot of them are much more accessible than you might think. It also helps if your clean room has a Tom, an excited outreach person who's going to help you kind of navigate this because it's not exactly the easiest thing to get into. I think it can be easier. My education as a physics student or a biology student didn't involve any nanotechnology. Hopefully, students that go through programs like this will come to an Atlas style program or come to an undergraduate program having known some of this already. You've got to have an engaged teacher. I like to think that that's someone like me. And then you've got to have some mature students. Unfortunately, this type of program does involve people going into somewhat hazardous situations, and so it's not likely to work in a middle school setting or even a freshman, sophomore, or junior setting. All the students that we engage with and run through this program are high school seniors. And here are some of them. Again, I don't think we're faking that enthusiasm. At least I know I'm not. That's me. There's Tom. Here's half of our students that we're going through. They went through half at a time last year. And this person over here is Lily, our superintendent. That's one of my first tips and tricks. If you can get someone pretty high up in your organization into the clean room and show them how magical all of this stuff is, you're going to have an awful lot better time trying to move it forward. So, what does the actual Atlas program look like? Well, the first thing is a clean room and infrastructure tour. I mentioned that we go into the clean room and we also go through all of the infrastructure. We're learning about the tools, about safety protocols, about how a process works. Tom does a really great job of taking a bare wafer, moving it through all the tools, and explaining, well, what do we need to do? Do we need to add something? Do we need to subtract something? How are we going to do that? What's the chemistry necessary? Why does this tool work the way it does? And then we go into the service chases behind it and learn about all the different supporting technologies. Of course, you need, very, very pure water. We move 50,000 cubic feet of air per minute in the clean room, and that takes an awful lot of machinery and energy. And we've got all sorts of really interesting gases that we need to use. It's important to think about all the different allied trades that go along with this, because while we surely do need an awful lot of technicians and engineers, we're also going to need welders and plumbers and pipe fitters that can put all of this stuff together. And while a lot of our programs do really great jobs of training all of these type of people, not a lot of them are training them to work in a clean room. You can't just start sawing a piece of PVC pipe in a clean room. People are going to start to get angry at you. So if we can teach these people these trades that are vitally important to our economy, but teach them in the context of a clean room, I think that'd be incredibly useful. So we like to show our students all of this, not just how to use the tools, but what's going on literally behind the scenes. Here we are with some of our water treatment or our air handling equipment. The students get to see all of this. And this is a little bit like, going in an underground tunnel at Disney World or something like that. You're pulling back the curtain and explaining that, yeah, there's a lot of shiny, cool machines that are poking through the wall in the clean room, but there's a lot of supporting infrastructure behind it. And I think that's really important to show students. It really gets at a somewhat ethical issue too. The semiconductor industry is not exactly green. It does use a lot of energy, and there are a lot of fairly dangerous chemicals that are in use. So how can we make that safer? How can we get students thinking about that from a young age? I think that's really important. The next step that we go to is the TCN course. That's Technology and Characterization at the Nanoscale. This is a wonderful course run at Cornell through the CNF, and it shows students all the basics of nanofabrication. The way that we do it is we watch it as a group. It is high level stuff. It goes into all of these different things. And I think if you pick any square on here, this is not necessarily something that a normal high school student would encounter, right? Thin films, I mean, you might think aluminum foil or saran wrap or something like that. But that means something completely different in nanotechnology. Having gone through an awful lot of these trainings myself, I can help the students understand these things. I can pause the presentation or mute the presentation and then explain something. And because I know what the course is like, I can provide relevant background knowledge so the students don't go in completely blind. This is not all of the stuff that's going to happen in the TCN course, but this is mostly the relevant stuff that we talk about because it's the type of material that we can easily match up to stuff in our curriculum. The educational plasma system deconstruction is really one of my favorite parts. You can see the frame right there. That used to be a plasma etcher. It is no longer there, and all my students are inside it. So they learned about all these different things. It's a fantastic way to learn. Here they are taking it apart, and Tom's right there next to us, showing about mass flow controllers and robots and all these pneumatics and electronics. A lot of these things are actually from the 90s, which much to my chagrin, is before most of these students were born. And so they're learning about the history of these technologies and how they've evolved and why some of these older technologies are used because they're much more reliable as opposed to some of the new digital technologies. So it's a really interesting experience. And again, CNF gets a whole lot of spare parts for some of their tools out of these too, which is an added benefit. The students learn about all the different materials, they learn about all the different safety features, and they basically take the entire thing apart. The almost last step is a hands-on device fabrication. There's another student right there who is a current Cornell student, actually. And we do a pretty basic device. We don't make anything functional, although I think we're going to change it up this year. Tom's got some great ideas. Deposit a thin film, put some photoresist on it. We have a pre-made mask that we use with the Atlas logo right there. We etch it and then clean it. It takes around 4 hours. Students go in the clean room in groups of 4 or 5, and they have lunch. I put outside the lab just in case you thought, we were eating inside. We're not going to do that, I promise. This is one of the highlights of the program for the students. We didn't tell them to smile like that. They really enjoy it that much. Lastly, we've got virtual reality content. So we realized two things. One, that it would be cost prohibitive and time prohibitive for us to take up basically Tom's entire year for him to take us through all these different these steps and show us all the different tools in the clean room. So if we have this virtual reality content and students can use it to deepen their knowledge, right? We don't get into, for example, projection photolithography because the training was a bit too involved. We didn't have that kind of time. But in VR, students can stand face to face with CNF experts and they can learn about that. We don't get a whole lot of metrology. We look at things under the microscope or we measure the thickness of our thin films, but we don't have a whole lot of other time to deal with that. So students can use the VR content and really get into a little bit of the deep end of that kind of thing. It's also fantastic for learning things ahead of time. For the past couple of cohorts that we've taken into the clean room, we haven't taught them how to put on a clean room suit. They've used their VR goggles, done our gowning module, and then 100% of them have completely gowned up completely correctly every time. No inside out hoods or anything like that. Everyone had safety goggles on. It's pretty impressive what this virtual reality content can do. Tom will tell you a little bit more about that toward the end of the presentation. So that's the basic steps of this kind of thing. I want to highlight the fact that this is the three-dimensional learning that we think is the best, well, we know is the best way to teach students, right? We've got these disciplinary core ideas, and we're teaching them not as a lecture, but as a hands-on experiment, right? If we've got some gases flowing into a chamber and we light up a plasma, how much energy does that take? We can turn the energy up and down and show them what happens to the plasma. We can put different gases in there and see what the color change is. We can see what the deposition rate does. So we're getting at these main ideas, but in a really interesting way. Of course, there's the cross-cutting concepts because we've got to have all of these things working together. Knowing chemistry is not enough. You've also got to know a little bit about physics, a little bit about biology, a little bit about optics, all of these things in order to make it work. And then, of course, there are the science and engineering practices. We're not just knowing these things, we're actually putting them to use. So if we're talking about a plasma, I mean, sure, you could say, well, the sun is plasma, which is true, but is not really tangible. If we can light an argon plasma and see that nice pink glow, that's an awful lot more tangible, and students are going to remember that quite a bit more. I mentioned before storylines as well. Storylines are a really great way to teach science. It's not just a series of lessons, it's a series of interconnected questions that students are asking and answering as they're generating their own knowledge. Mainly storylines are based on phenomena, right? So we're told that we should start our class with some interesting phenomenon and get the students interested, maybe a discrepant event, something unexpected. Well, almost everything at the nanoscale is unexpected. Gold nanoparticles are not gold. Depending on the size, there are lots of different colors. And we can explain why that is, right? We can explain why, if you're trying to look at something smaller than the wavelength of visible light, you can't use visible light to look at it. So here are just a few different areas, and you can put them together into a lot of different storylines. Even earth and space sciences, right? Weathering and erosion, there's chemical weathering, and we're doing chemical weathering and erosion just really quickly with some fairly dangerous gases on some pretty expensive rocks, even though it's pretty much the same thing. I put ethics, government, and economics at the end of it too, because all of this is really expensive, and that thought is not lost on the students. When they go into the clean room, they're very aware that they're using millions of dollars worth of equipment, and that if this was an industrial clean room, there would be hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars worth of equipment. And if they think about the cost of an iPhone or who's being paid to make it or where they're being made, that gets into some really interesting discussions about subsidies and about economics and ethics and things like that. So we think that Atlas is a really great way to teach all of these things and put them all together. You may also be thinking, though, what about all of these things, right? So let me assuage some of your fears. So my boss would never let me do that, you might be saying, right? Well, Tom got his boss to let us do that. Tom, how did you make it happen?
Ah, it took some time. Uh, it took some time, almost a decade, for me to have everything kind of fall into place. And but now you have a really effective example that you can point to. So let's not have it take a decade for everybody else. Um, I firmly believe that youth are the best part of our society. We have an opportunity to mold them and create really great members of our society. And I think that we should harness that. And also harness your inner Ferris Bueller. If you've ever seen the Ferris Bueller movie, you know that this is a guy like me who took a day off from school and went and had a really great time. Um, Sometimes you need to get creative and bend the rules to make a program like this happen. Build those partnerships, and we're here to help you do that. Ultimately, on the university end, it's a lot of paperwork to make these things happen, right? But that paperwork is all doable if you have the right person that's willing to drive things, and if you're willing to drive things. David talked about how we reserve this to high school seniors. 18 is an arbitrary number, and it took me a long time to convince people of that. But maturity and a great instructor are the key part of this program. Um, David is brilliant. He introduces nanotechnology outside of our 2 weeks that we spend at CNF. He has the students kind of engaged throughout his curriculum, and he's got a lot of responsibilities in his class. I mean, Dave, you're teaching physics, calculus, and a number of other college level credit courses to high school seniors. So, I mean, I commend you for your efforts, and you're a phenomenal instructor. So, yeah, if you think your boss would never let you do that, try, and you'll find that you can rely on David and I, and we'll give you the support you need, I think.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It really did take a long time and it really did take some pushing, but it really is worth it. What we're doing here is education the way that education should be done and should have always been done. Um, I can't say enough about it. It does cost a lot. Tom's time is not cheap. There are tools that we have to pay for time on. But consider this if you're talking to someone at your local clean room, right? A lot of spare parts are incredibly expensive. If you take apart a plasma system or any other tool, you're going to get an awful lot of spare parts out of it. Even if you can't use them yourself, it might be possible to sell them on an aftermarket kind of situation and make up some of the costs. I know that in New York, where we're located, workforce development is a priority, particularly around this kind of industry. We've got a large Micron factory going in just about an hour from Cornell. And so, as Tom pointed out, there aren't going to be a lot of people that have the skills to be able to work in that factory. So New York State is pushing this in quite a big way. Grants are available for workforce development and this kind of thing. In New York State, we have something called BOCES, stands for Board of Cooperative Educational Services. It's basically a consortium of local school districts who pool their money to purchase things that they couldn't otherwise purchase by themselves. Think something like a cosmetology program, purchasing all of the crazy chemicals and all of the salon equipment that they might need, or a welding class, or a auto body class, purchasing a paint booth or something like that. There's lots of other organizations that provide career and technical education across the country, and certainly within New York State, and a lot of them can provide funding. I know in New York State, as one example, if you purchase things through BOCES, the next year back, your school or district can get that money back in aid. So there are ways to make this work. Um, on a non-monetary side, we've had 9 students in the past couple of years come back to do internships or REUs with CNF. So we're driving people to come work at CNF, to come back and work CNF, driving them to go enroll at CNF, and then also to be a member of this, this community right here. So it's something that you could talk about if you're dealing with a community college or a university as an enrollment issue. So it's
And
definitely a recruiting thing.
and one of our students was just offered an internship at Tokyo Electron this summer, a major equipment and manufacturer in the semiconductor industry.
It's pretty amazing what the students are doing. Um, Tom and I are in contact with people, in the industry quite frequently. And we ask them very frequently, what do you need? What kind of people are you looking for? And a lot of times they'll say, I need people who can read, can work on a team, and can show up on time, which are all great skills. And then so I generally ask, well, then what if we have students who can put on a clean room suit and who can run a plasma etcher? I've had people in the industry tell me, well, that's a unicorn. We're going to hire them right away. So we're really creating some great opportunities for our students here. Um, we often see this as a somewhat of a one-way street. There's a lot of knowledge and things that are transferring from the university to the students. Um, we like to think we can give something back as well, though. Staff can refine their teaching techniques and educational materials. If you can explain a plasma tool or chemical vapor deposition to a high school student, chances are you can explain it to just about anyone. Additionally, this is fantastic PR. This is just a couple of the articles that have been published about what we've been doing. New Visions is my program right there, right? There's BOCES and Micron, a local company. And on the right, you can see Nano Day, where we had about 500 students and families come through our atrium here in Duffield Hall and learn about all sorts of interesting nano things. So it's fantastic PR. And I don't know if you can put a price on that. Another what about might be, well, this environment isn't safe for kids. I'm going to jump to the last point there and say, if your clean room isn't safe for high school students, is it really safe? I think that's a really good way to think about it, right? Um, I hesitate to use the word idiot proof, right? But we do have to kind of look at things so that anyone, there's a bug in my room, I apologize, so that anyone could potentially be safe in this particular environment. Now, at Cornell, we have a wonderful lab safety program. All of my students go through this program before they're allowed to go into any lab on campus because I think it's important for them to know about all the different hazards that they might have. So they complete this lab safety certificate program, and there's a lot that you need to complete in order to do it. On the left, you see the list of the required courses, and on the right, you see a partial list of what they can choose from. If you think about it, right, well, there's compressed gases in clean rooms, hydrofluoric acid, certainly. For the record, we do not let the students work directly with hydrofluoric acid. There are pyrophorics, certainly carcinogens, lots of flammable liquids, corrosive chemicals. They've got to be wearing their PPE. Fume hoods are all over the place. Chemical waste disposal, handled by the instructors, but at least they know about it. Small lab spills, they should be able to do that in case of emergency. Chemical segregation and storage, lots and lots of different things right here. So take a moment to think, do most undergrads or graduate students take all these programs? Do they have this kind of safety training? My students are very, very well trained by the time they go into this. They take the quizzes and then they end up with all of this knowledge. So we've never had an incident and it's a very safe environment. You might say to yourself, well, this doesn't fit into my curriculum. And I say, yes, it absolutely does. Nano levels the playing field. For better or for worse, for better in this case, there are very few people that know anything about nanotechnology or nanofabrication. So whereas if you were going to do some sort of physics analogy with a baseball bat and a baseball to demonstrate momentum, the baseball players in your group are certainly going to have a better idea of what you're talking about. But if you again go back to that argon ion in an electric field, there are precious few people who will know what you're talking about. That levels the playing field. It puts everyone at square one, and you can all start learning together. I like to think of different ways that you can put this in your curriculum by substitution, changing classroom examples like I've talked about, or augmentation, right? Adding in nano-related concepts. It's really difficult to talk about large numbers. If you start talking about light years and millions and billions of kilometers, that's not something you can show your students. Sure, you can show them the powers of 10 video, and you can show them how far away the nearest star is and how fast light is and how long it would take to get there. But we can also go into the clean room and we can use e-beam lithography and make a line that is 6 nanometers wide, right? And then we can look at that in an electron microscope. You can see it. That's a much better way to get at what nano means. That's a much better way to understand what 10 to the negative ninth is than trying to get at a really big number. Tom recommended a great book, Chip War. If you were thinking about a language arts curriculum, this is easily insertable, right? Having read the book, I don't know if it's the most gripping novel that a 10th or 11th grader might enjoy reading, but it gets at a lot of the interesting nuances and how the chip industry kind of worked in America. You see a clip here, or a picture here rather, of our poet laureate from Tompkins County reading a very short nano poem at our Nano Day, right? So there's lots of ways that this can fit into your curriculum. If you have elementary school or middle school students, I bet if you asked them to write the smallest poem they could, that would be a great challenge, right? So there's lots of ways to fit all of this kind of thing in. You might say there isn't a clean room nearby. Well, yes, there is. There's lots of clean rooms, particularly in the Northeast where we are. This is just a sampling, but there are clean rooms all over. I realize that taking a trip across state lines or something like that is certainly not possible for every classroom, but there are facilities like these, and a lot of them are more accessible than you might think. In fact, some of them aren't accessible because no one's asked before. If you go to a nanofabrication facility and say, hey, I've got some mature students and I really want to show them around this industry because I want to feed into your workforce, I bet they'll be pretty jazzed about that. If you are in an area where there aren't clean rooms nearby, fear not, though. Tom and the CNF have a solution for you. You can learn nanoscale stuff from anywhere.
Yeah. So, um, so it turns out Micron is planning on building the biggest clean room in the United States about an hour from where I work. And they're planning on 9 to 10,000 direct hires. And so while the Atlas program, we work with about 10 students every year and we make an incredible impact, I would have to do a lot of Atlas programs and clone myself to meet the workforce demand of a facility like the one that's being built up the road. So we got thinking about how can we create scalable educational content and really put the CNF's expert staff out there. And so we've begun creating VR educational content. Uh, we are the picture that you see there is the experience you have in VR or on a laptop or on a smartphone or tablet. You're standing face to face with our expert staff using 360-degree video. There's embedded clickable content, quizzes, and so on. So we're planning on producing around 20 modules that cover the core competencies of the lab and how to work in a clean room environment. But the QR tag there is actually something special. We created a youth outreach module for the K through 12 audience, and it is free and openly accessible to the public. If you grab that QR tag and go to the link, you can start using this in your classroom tomorrow and have in the course of a 20-minute VR module, your students will use about $2 million worth of semiconductor equipment and have a very similar experience to the one that David's students have when they visit the clean room in fabricating a simple device and starting to understand how this whole clean room and why we work in a clean room and how it all comes together in creating the devices that power our lives.
It's a fantastic experience. We'll share this presentation so you can get the links, and we have the links on the last slide as well, so you can see it. You're going to want to do it immediately after this presentation, I assure you. So where does that leave us? That leaves us with what we do at the CTE Center where I work. CTE stands for Career and Technical Education. And what we're doing is we're training people for sure. We're training them how to be construction workers and to work as cosmetologists and welders and things like that. But the thing that's different about what we do, and the thing that I really love about the place that I work, and the thing that I hope to bring to this Atlas program, is that we're not just learning what to do, we're learning why we do it. And that's so critical because that goes back to our portrait of a graduate, right? We're critical thinkers now. So, yeah, we can be welders or we can be technicians or construction workers, but when something goes wrong, we can also be problem solvers, right? There's that innovative problem solving right there. We don't often think about that outside a STEM classroom, but I think Atlas brings all that together really nicely. Literate across the content areas, well, I think I've demonstrated that in order to be successful in a cleaner environment, you've got to know all of those kind of things, right? You've got to be an effective communicator. If you're going to train other people or work with other people on a team, you've absolutely got to be able to do that. You can try being an engineer on your own, but it's probably not going to work out really well. The semiconductor industry is not just in the US. It involves people from all over the world, and so you've got to be a respectful global citizen, right? And finally, you've got to be culturally and emotionally competent in order to do all of this kind of thing. It's a fast moving industry. Things are going to go wrong. You're going to have to change jobs. And that's probably just a fact of life for the economy moving forward for the next 40 or 50 years. And so having these competencies is really important. I see no better way to do that than through the Atlas program. And I hope I've demonstrated that to you tonight. So to close it all out, we can say that, yeah, STEM is really important. And we've got to teach students these basic concepts. They have to know about physics and earth and space science and chemistry and biology. They simply need to know of those things. Knowing them and being able to work with those ideas is simply not enough, though. You've got to be able to apply them. You've got to be able to do it in a creative way as well. So let's put the art back into STEM and make it STEAM, right? But let's not even stop there. Let's put the humanities in here. Let's talk about the ethics and the economics of all of this thing and make it STEAM, to coin a new phrase. And if you do all of this together, you can do it through Nano. I think that's the most exciting way to do it. It's working with my students, it's working with the program that Tom and I developed, and we're so excited to make it work for you as well. So please reach out. There's our email addresses. Here are links to our Atlas program, to my TST BOCES New Visions engineering program. I'd be happy to discuss that. If you don't have something like that in your area, I've already consulted with another school district on how they might start something like that, so I'm happy to do it. And there's a link to the TCN course as well. By the way, you don't have to be a member of the CNF community in order to take that course. There's the virtual online course that starts in January, and you can register for it. There's going to be a lot of stuff that you may or may not understand, but you're going to get a great appreciation for how all of this works. The background of this slide is not insignificant. Tom's going to explain why that is.
So the background of this slide is a scanning electron microscope image of a lycopodium particle. These are a dried plant spore or a fungus spore, and they have a really interesting property where they have a lot of surface area. And so there's a fun science demo that you can do with your students. And Dave, can you unshare the screen?
Absolutely can.
We'll put it back up in a minute. So um, if you calculate the surface area of a marble, a standard, 1 centimeter diameter marble, the surface area isn't very big. It's actually incredibly small. But if you took these 40 micron lycopodium particles and calculated the surface area of an individual and put those into the size of a marble, the surface area is almost a meter squared, right? So that's cool. Lycopodium particles are hydrophobic, which is an interesting little demo to do at the beginning. But when you put them in a pile on a platen, light them up with a lighter, they don't do anything particularly impressive. They kind of sizzle. But when you disperse them in the air, it becomes one of the most impactful STEM demos that you can do. So I'm going to lean back here, and I have this little widget that I made. It's a piece of tubing. Let me turn off my background. It's a piece of tubing attached to a grill lighter. Adjust background and effects. Turn that off. Okay, so here we go. Um, so when you disperse them in the air, you have a much different effect. So, uh, and I did not light the roof of my garage on fire. I have never set off a smoke detector doing this demo in all of my years, and neither has David. It's an incredibly impactful STEM demo that you can do with your students to show them exactly how fun nano and microtechnology is and how the scale of these things matter. If you work if you work anywhere in a farming community, you may have heard of a grain bin explosion. That is exactly what I just made happen in a very controlled manner. If you have farmers this time of year are out grinding grain and you get this big cloud of dust, a tractor can backfire and trigger a really big explosion. Um, but what I just did there is actually widely used in the special effects industry for a controlled flame if you wanted to make an action movie. So you can make your own action movie in the classroom, and it's a lot of fun, and you will be amazed at the kids' reaction. So let's get to some questions and discussion.
First, thank you, David and Tom, for sharing this amazing program with us. Your enthusiasm is so contagious, and I'm excited to hear any questions. While people unmute themselves, can I ask, are people around, teachers that are around you or in the area, could they send their students to you to this Atlas program, or how would that work? And is there any cost per student?
So right now, we're running this for us kind of right here. We'd certainly be interested in starting more Atlas programs around the area, and there would be a cost associated with it. It would depend on the type of programming that you'd like to do, and the number of students that would be there. Um, but there would be a cost. That said, a lot of that can be offset by running the cost through an organization like BOCES, getting a workforce development grant, or as I said, maybe just telling your administrator or telling someone at your school that this is fantastic PR and it can drive admissions or it can drive admissions to programs like BOCES.
Hmm.
And David, how many school districts does TST BOCES serve?
We serve 8 different school districts throughout 3 counties.
Yep. And OCM BOCES, Onondaga, Cortland, Madison serves a big swath of central New York. Broome, Tioga BOCES, so these are all entities that I'm sure would be interested in working with us if you're actually in our local area. Yeah.
Do you have any sister organizations like BOCES in other states, or is that a New York specific program?
That's a New York specific program. There are other programs and other facilities like that in other states. I'm not a teacher in other states, so unfortunately, I'm not familiar with all of them. Once we start getting this really, really big, I'm going to do all that research so that we can get into all of those different things. But right now, we're waiting for people from those organizations to reach out and say, yeah, we want to do that. And we hope some of them are sitting here on this Zoom right now.
Yeah. So the term you're looking for in other states is career and technical education. That's pretty universal across the country, right, Dave?
Yes, and different people, it's frequently called vocational education, something like that. But it's a consortium of school districts that are kind of pooling their resources. They're called many different things, but career and technical education is kind of the umbrella term.
Right. Jennifer, please go ahead.
Thank you so much. I'm sorry my camera is not operating today, or else I would be full face. I am very, very enthusiastic about nanoscience, and I teach it here at my school here at New Providence. And I know a lot of my students are also intrigued and excited about, what this kind of science holds. It's very stimulating for them. I was wondering if there's any vacation, like winter break, spring break, or summer opportunities where my students could potentially apply and then go and stay closer to your region, your clean rooms to get this kind of experience. Or alternately, if you know anything that's under development here in New Jersey.
Well, I know that. Uh, so hosting overnight programs becomes more challenging. I don't work with David's students overnight, and there's a lot more rigorous standards to be met at the university if we're going to be having students overnight. So that's something we'd have to really explore. But I know that we have researchers from New Jersey Institute of Technology that come up and use our clean room on occasion, and I believe there's a clean room there. Um, that may be a little bit smaller than the CNF one, but you might be able to work with them directly. And if you want to connect us up and kind of bring a team together to sort of propose this sort of program, we'd be happy to help you with that.
Amazing. Thanks so much.
Demis, please go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, that's I love that you guys want to help other institutions be able to do something similar and get high schoolers or even maybe city college students into the clean room. Have you guys worked with other? It sounds like you're trying to find other clean rooms nearby, some other region. So it could be another university. Have you actually worked with another university and helped them open up their clean room to city college students or high school students before?
We've had a lot of discussions so we're up until very recently part of the NNCI network, and that funding has sunsetted. But we've talked to a number of the educators in the network about programs like this, and they see the challenge of the paperwork, being able to bring young students in the lab, but it's been very well received, but we haven't launched another Atlas program elsewhere in the United States yet.
Yet. We're looking at a couple of other BOCES near us.
Yep.
I'm in contact with a couple of other teachers, and it looks like that's heading in a really good direction. So we hope to have Atlas 2 and Atlas 3 in the very near future, but we need to go outside of central New York. So, Dennis, if you have a facility in mind, please let us know. I noticed that Maria put in the chat that we can help you find a clean room near you. There's lots of opportunities. There may be even smaller clean rooms at community colleges that might not be so well known. There's a couple around us that have some, they're not exactly it's not a clean room, but they have all the tools. And so you can use the VR stuff to show them how to gown up and then use the actual tools at our local community college to teach. There's lots of permutations, different ways that this could work.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I actually
Thank
have
you.
done something similar where I worked with another group kind of that was trying to do a CHIPS Act uh, proposal, and I got them in touch with their nearest university clean room and helped them um, not make the, not help them avoid the community college trying to build a clean room, right?
Yeah,
Just use the one that already
exactly.
exists,
Yeah.
and the university knows how to keep it open, and they do research in there, and help them open their doors to non-university students, basically.
Yeah. And, the map that we showed earlier, the slide said this is just a sample of the number of clean rooms in the United States that are accessible. Just about any sort of tier one university is going to have a clean room on campus, right? So your
Mhm.
state schools are generally within a fair commute for your high school students. Take them on a field trip. A lot of when they build these university clean rooms, they build them in such a way, they design them in such a way that they can be an externally educational experience. So lots of windows on the outside of the clean room so that we can have
Mhm.
junior high students be able to look in. So if you're a junior high educator or even a K-6 educator, don't be dissuaded. You can interface with your local clean room and start exposing young people to these facilities. And most of them have an outreach program.
Yeah.
In fact, even your industrial clean rooms, if you've got a Global Foundries or a Micron or a Intel in your neighborhood, they all have some sort of education program where they will invite school groups in for a tour. Um, so we can start exposing more young people to this. More questions? Keep them coming.
One thing you guys might find helpful is in a similar vein, trying to any sort of manufacturing education, including semiconductor manufacturing education, should be really local, should be regional, right? You don't necessarily want to have to fly someone across the country to do that kind of training if there's something nearby, because it's hands-on. And if someone can drive an hour, that's much better, right? So one thing me and Jens, who's on the call, and some colleagues at USC did was write a handbook for it's a copy of the Penn State handbook, but theirs was for nanotech. We wrote the same handbook for semiconductor education, basically, trying to make it easier for a university. It's kind of the same thing that you guys are talking about, to make it easier for a university to be able to spin up some sort of experience in their lab using whatever they already have, like rather than having to copy someone else's process. They probably have something they already know how to do.
Huh.
So yeah, you can find that on our that's part of our dreams, our CHIPS Act, DoD CHIPS Act project. So if you find that, I'd be happy to send that to you if maybe you'd find it helpful in terms of just lowering the barrier. You don't have to redevelop everything, and you don't have to double Cornell's equipment,
Yeah.
right? You already have equipment. How do you make that work for something, for an experience like this?
Cool.
Yeah, I'd love to see that.
People in the chat are also saying if you like to share the handbook here or send it to me and I'll make sure it's included in the list of resources that we'll send with the summary.
Okay, sure, I'll do both.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Well, the big takeaway is that we are here to help, and we are eager to help. It's youth outreach and education is something David and I are both very passionate about.
We want more Atlas programs and we want to make it happen where you are. So please reach out. Let us know how we can do education the right way all across the country.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Tell your friends, everyone. Get a group going. And I think this is something that is very much community driven. With enough people interested, it's something we can really build. With that, I want to thank again our speakers, Tom and David. Thank you for your time. Thank you, everyone, for being here. As always, I'll send this recording to all of you and the slides, and hope to see you in early 2026 for our next session. Have a good night, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.